I hope.
Now, I believe we're recording now.
Oh, yes, it's lit.
Yeah, we're good. Now then, there's a photo there, you said, of Mrs. Gibbons. So I'll get that to the camera. I don't know if the camera can pick that up. There we go, there's Mrs. Gibbons. Now, you said she was a short lady?
She was very short and walked very fast.
So she had sort of those short legs that sort of move at an incredible rate.
That's right.
There we go. So tell me more about her. So it's an old German lady.
She was, but you think she was English. She has had a slight...
a very slight accent.
Slight accent, and that goes
you have a photo of your, did you say your brother as well?
No, it's in there.
It's in there, I'll get it. Right, there we go. And this is reflection will...
I'm on the left.
Way of view, yeah. So you can see you on one side, and there's Graham there on the other side. And you say that was at Brownie's wedding?
Brownie's
wedding. Gotcha. So pop that in here. So
oh gosh, I've got things to say about the weddings of your sisters.
We've got that coming up as well.
Oh crikey, there's so much to come up.
I know indeed. So let's talk about your time at university. So cheers, by the way.
Oh, cheers.
So it's after 5:30, so we're allowed to drink. It's after 5:30, so we're allowed to drink now. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers. So you were saying that so you had a short 20-minute walk.
Yes.
So you would do that every morning.
Yes.
So what was your introduction to university like? Your very first days and so on.
I was overwhelmed by the size of the university setting. The medical school and the adjacent hospital, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, was also down the road from me. And it was a very large building. And the nurses' home, which was on the other side of a road that came between the nurses' home and the hospital. And I understand that a year ago they knocked down that original building and built a much larger one.
So, the hospital or
hospital.
So so you were studying at the hospital, not in classes in the university grounds, but you were studying at the hospital, is that right?
Yes, the medical school was part of the complex, which included the hospital.
Got you. Right.
And there was up to the medical school, if you came from the university, there was a flight of steps like the entrance to St Paul's Cathedral.
Right, okay.
And at the top, those students that went to the left were dental students. Those that went to the right were medical students.
Got you.
And for the first year or two, the two mixed because of the first year medical school was anatomy.
Right.
The arrangement of medical students now is entirely different. But at that time, the first year was anatomy, and we dissected dead bodies.
Oh, good grief! Where did they get those from?
Well, we weren't told.
Oh my goodness!
They came from a mortuary somewhere.
Well, you'd hope so.
And because at the end of a year they were all in bits. But funny enough, because they were dead, you were remote from them. You never knew them as alive people.
Yeah, but so these are. I'm kind of guessing these people who might have died in the hospital.
They could have done, but we asked about that. No, they didn't die in the hospital. They died in homes for the homeless, that sort of thing.
Oh God! No, my cynical mind senses something sinister, but I presume hopefully not. Yes, it might have been people who were homeless, for example.
Yes.
And and died in homeless shelters, or were, from the cold or something like that. Oh, good grief! I can just imagine the.
Yes.
I don't want my mind to go there too much. So you asked about it.
I asked about it. I was told, well, it's none of your business.
Good grief. Okay, so that's fine.
First year was anatomy. Second year was what's called physiology, which is, the first one was the structure of the body.
Right.
The second year was on the functioning of the body.
Right. Okay.
And if you got, there was an exam, very stiff exam, at the end of these 2 years. If you got through the anatomy, you could go on to physiology.
Right.
If you got through the physiology, you could get onto what was eventually called the clinical work. And if you got through that, you would eventually qualify. Somehow they would make sure that everybody that got through that bit would eventually qualify as a clinical doctor.
So what was the process like of all of that, and what were the decisions you had to take? What was involved?
Well, the first one was you simply had to show the examiners, who were all doctors.
Yeah.
They would say, "Show me the X muscle."
Yeah.
There. And also, one had to dissect the brain,
Okay.
which was a separate issue. You would dissect the physical body, and the brain would be taken out, and you had to dissect that, the different parts.
So take it to its various different component parts and
Correct.
Okay, so how did you go about that? Presumably, obviously, you've only got a limited number of these that you can get to use. So if you drop one, that's pretty bad news.
Yes.
I
don't know. There were double numbers of corpses round the first
walk in a
year.
room. So I'm sorry to dwell on this, but it's just I don't want
Yes.
to make sure that no crimes have occurred that I'm suddenly a witness to. You walk in a room, and these are lying on what, slabs? They're lying on
Slabs.
It's like steel bed
Yeah,
type
that's it.
things that are wheeled in, and so they were in the room when you went in.
Yes.
And so no questions asked. So somebody else's job was to put them in the room and then leave before you lot went in.
Correct.
And, well, these are covered in sheets. What was the situation?
Yes, initially a big sheet over them.
Yeah.
There were two men that dealt with that, who were not doctors. They were, we called them the body snatchers.
Well, I was about to say.
Yes, it was. They went out and got the bodies and brought them back.
No, I'm thinking of Victorian Dickensian London stories of that people had to guard graves. Did you know? Complete sideline. In fact, I'm not going to go. This is your story, not mine. So so you're walking in a room, and how many of there were you on this class?
There were a total in my current year 60.
60.
I can't remember whether it's 60 or 70.
So there's 60 or 70 students on the medical course with you.
What is interesting, only 8 of them were girls. Well, nowadays it's the opposite way round.
Of course, yeah. There's majority women. So let's say out of that 60 or so that you'd have, maybe 40 that would be women, and maybe 20 that would be men nowadays.
Yes.
But so how many of you would walk in this room with the bodies?
Oh, it was wide open.
So there'd be 60 or 70 of you walking in a room.
Yes.
And this room would have how many bodies?
Well, I suppose there must have been about 8 or 10 of us in each body.
Room. Okay, gotcha.
So there must have been, if it's 10 medical students and there were 70 in my year, there would be 7 bodies.
Because I'm checking, because if it was like one body per student, I'd have been really worried as to where they were getting them from.
Yes. Oh no, it wasn't.
Right.
It was communal corpses.
Gotcha. So you had to share a corpse.
Yes. Another interesting thing that each of these bodies had a tutor there who described the body.
Presumably alive.
Oh, he was alive.
That's good to know.
All except one were people who would eventually become surgeons, because they had to know the first part of the exam for surgeons, those who were going to become fellows of the Royal College of Surgeons, had the anatomy at their fingertips.
Right. So they were the tutors, were they?
They were the tutors. So they were teaching us, but at the same time they were teaching themselves.
Got you. So
all except one, who was the tutor on our body, who was a man. His name was Dr. Brandt, B-R-A-N-D-T,
Gotcha.
German.
There's a lot of Germans in this story that are turning.
Oh yes, there are.
So okay.
So
yesterday evening it was hairdressers, and now we've got Germans turning up in
yes,
the story.
that's true.
Yeah.
He was a lovely man. He was difficult to know. I thought he was very old. He probably 50s, early 60s.
I think anybody when you're 18 years old, anybody over 30 or their mid 30s is ancient, aren't they?
Oh crikey! I used to think that people who were 30 were old. I mean, it's time they popped off.
Yeah.
But Dr. Brandt
Yeah.
had come to this country just before the war. In retrospect, at the end of the war, I found out that he was Jewish, and he had been in charge of anatomy at Heidelberg University.
Right, in Germany.
In Germany, and at the end of the war, he went back and became professor of anatomy at the medical school in Hindenburg.
So I'm thinking of a German Jew. So was he in Germany for the duration, or did he make it to England before the war?
He made it to England.
Okay, that's fine.
But as a job, he became a tutor at the medical school.
Gotcha.
I don't quite know how that came about, but he was a lovely man. As we were looking at the body, I can remember him putting his hand on my shoulder and pointing out, no, it's like that sort of thing.
Well, hang on a second, let's pause that phone call.